I just made an awesome upgrade to my shed, which is this sturdy and durable ramp that looks amazing. And we only had a few issues along the way. Oh no. Let me show you how we did it. All right, so there's two things that I want to go for with this ramp. Number one, I want to make it super sturdy. Number two, I want to make it super durable, ready for years of use. Those are things we're trying to solve for, and I've got a couple tricks for both of those. One of the most important things is how long do we want the ramp? Now, I will say that most ramps, the most common length is going to be 4 feet, and that works for most sheds. But in reality, all you gotta do is put a board out here. This is at 48 inches, and this is a bit too steep. But now if I extend it out to 5 feet, that's gonna feel a lot better. And I could just go with that. But instead of just using a fixed number like 4 feet or 5 feet or 6 feet, what you wanna do is use a multiple of the width of your decking boards. And so the decking boards I'm gonna use are 5.5 inch wide. Most decking boards are that, kind of that 1x6 material. And for me, I'm gonna go closer to 5 feet. So instead of going 60 inches, I'm gonna go 60.5, which will be 11 boards. And that's gonna allow you to use a full board. You're not gonna have to rip it down, make any cuts. It's gonna look great. Hey, what's up guys? It's Brad from the future, and I got a little tip for you that I forgot to mention when I was doing layout. So when you're laying out those boards, I didn't account for any expansion gaps at all, and that's because when you think about pressure treated lumber, you can put that tight to each other because the boards are going to shrink. We're actually going to be using some Trex Select composite decking. For installation, this needs 3/16 of an inch gap in between each board. So when I'm doing that layout, I need to add 3/16 to my 5.5 inches, which would put us at 5 11/16. And then I could do multiples of that. So I went ahead and accounted for that, but make sure that you're using the width of your board plus any expansion gaps when you're doing those multiples to see how long you want to make your support beams. All right, so now we have the length of a ramp. We're gonna start prepping the ground, and we need to make sure the ground is nice and level so that it will be level with our decking. So I'm gonna go ahead and mark the edges of this. We're gonna dig that out so we can put in a little layer of gravel. All right, so I dug the dirt out, which by the way, being at the end of summer is like digging granite, but I'm about 4 inches deep down here on this end. And as far as the width, I just kind of guessed as how deep I need to be, because what we're going to do is we're going to be supporting that whole angled cut. And what I did was I grabbed a 2x6. This is a scrap board. What you can do is you can kind of set where that board's gonna be over here on the shed and then look at where it's falling. And what this means is it's hitting right here on the dirt. That means I've got to go wider on this pit. All right, it's been a while guys, but another edition of mistakes were made. And that is because as I started digging this out to get the slope of this piece and making it flush with the ground in the front, then I realized the board is no longer actually hitting the dirt. And that was weird. And then I looked back, and that's because it's actually hitting the 4x6 that is the perimeter of my gravel foundation for the shed. So unfortunately, no matter how much I dig, I will not get level without digging in and actually cutting away on this beam. And I'm not gonna do that because that would just look and feel horrible. So instead, the other option is to make the ramp longer. And that's fine because I actually did the math. I looked at how much more this would extend. It's right about 10 inches. And if we look at the multiples of the decking boards, instead of using 11 boards, I'll now use 13 boards. And instead of a 5-foot ramp, we'll end up going to a 6-foot ramp. So, you know, you're gonna run into these issues from time to time and you just roll with the punches, and it's an extra long ramp, and that's fine. I've got the base dug out a bit where we're gonna be landing, but I wanna work on the front here real quick because the way that we're gonna attach to the shed is actually through a ledger board. And I have this trim board on here right now for my shed, and I need to take that off because that's gonna get in the way. We're gonna go with a treated 2x6 right on top of this. So I'm gonna look at the ramp here is gonna be the full width of the opening, and I'm gonna come an inch off of that, and I'm just gonna strike a line down here and then cut my trim board and take that out, and that's where the ledger board will go. All right, so now that we have a flush face here, I can go ahead and measure this, and this should be 60.5 inch, which it is, which is nice. So now I can cut this 2x6 to that, and that will be my ledger here, which I'm temporarily gonna put in place so we can get our measurements off it. I got my ledger board attached, but the way that I located this, and it wasn't just under this kick plate right here, but basically I need to make sure that when I close the door, that the bottom of the door is not going to interfere with the deck boards. And so when you swing this out here, you can see this comes down and hits right at this mark that I made, and that my deck boards are 7/8 of an inch. So I put the board right about an inch lower. So that should give me 1/8 of an inch of clearance. So make sure that you account for your decking on top of your ledger board, because if you go too high, then your door is gonna hit it and you're gonna have to redo everything. All right, now we need to level out the landing zone for the joist, and then we can start getting our calculations of exactly what we need. I'm just using some all-purpose stone from the big box, and this is kind of the best you can get in a bag. You don't want to use pea gravel or anything like that. You want something that can compact nice and good. If I had some more of this, I believe it's called a crusher run or number 57, I forget exactly what it is, but you want something that's nice and jagged so that it'll hold its form and compact and level nicely. One thing I forgot to mention, I did tamp down all the dirt before I started this, so you want to tamp that down and compact it so that you have a nice base for the stone when you get started. Let's see where we're at. We're a little high on this end, actually. When you start cutting the joist, it gets a little tricky to find out that right angle, but I think I've got a plan on how to do it here. And basically what I'm gonna do is the full length of our ramp is gonna be 72 inches, and that counts into it the ledger board here. So I'm gonna put this on top of the ledger board, and now basically the bottom of this board is gonna basically be where the top of the ramp would be, but obviously this is far too long. So I'm gonna cut this just a little bit past what the full length of the ramp would be, and we're gonna do that at 72 inches. And that's going to allow us to put it down onto the gravel. Right, so and now my board is going to sit on top of the ledger, and it will sit down where it needs to in our little pad down here, and this is going to be exactly where our ramp is, the bottom of this. So what we can do is come up here, and all I have to do is use this ledger to mark the cut line. So I can make my cut here, and that's gonna fit perfectly on here. And now to translate that is use another 2x6 down here at the bottom. So the front of this is gonna be dropping 5.5 inches, the length of that 2x6. So now if I mark a line using a 2x6 right here, when everything drops together, then the bottom of this cut will be laying right on our pad. All right, so now there's this nice long cut, and I tell you what, this is very hard to cut by hand for sure. And if you're gonna cut it, use a straight edge for your circular saw if you're gonna do that, if you can. But if you have a track saw, I would highly recommend using that because it's gonna turn out way better. You can still do it with a straight edge or by hand, but if you've got a track saw, use it here. All right, if our cuts were right, then this should fit nicely. Oh no. I was a little bit worried about this. We actually are hitting the post. And that's because I believe the post actually rises up over here, and also because this drops down. But we're already cut to length. So I'm actually just gonna notch out under here on this beam, and it should just be just a tiny little 1/2 inch notch. It shouldn't affect the stability of it at all, kind of like a stringer on a stair. We'll notch that out, and then I think it's gonna fit. All right, with the little notch here, this fits perfectly. And I hate that I had to notch it, but you probably won't have to do that on yours. But we landed exactly where we wanted to in the pad here, and this is gonna be perfect for the ramp. So what I'm gonna do is use this as my master board, and then I'm going to trace that on some other boards, and we're gonna get the rest of the joists cut. At this point, we can start looking at attaching the joist to our ledger board here. Now, there's two ways to do this, but of course, we want this thing to be super strong, totally heavy duty and durable. So one of the ways is to take off your ledger board and then attach it with screws from the back or nails. And you would do that through all of them and then have to bring it back and attach it as one piece. That's a little bit clunky and not as strong as using rafter hangers. So I've got this little rafter hanger here, and this is an open-ended rafter hanger, so it'll work with a slanted rafter joist in our situation here. And so this is just gonna slide down over to the ledger, and now instead of screwing in from the back side, which is not great because you're screwing into end grain, we're gonna screw in from the sides, which is gonna be a much stronger connection. Now, the only issue here is that because I set this up so that it would be right at the end of the ledger board, I did not account for the ears on this little joist hanger here. So I'm gonna actually take this off and make it a little bit longer so that we can get good attachment here and everything will be nice and solid. Also, we just got in our Trex Select decking, which is gonna be the decking we're gonna be using for the top. And this is gonna look awesome, but I can see exactly how this is gonna fit. And I need to drop it down just a bit. So this will be a good time to do that. But I can't wait to tell you more about this. This is from our sponsor today, Trex and US LBM. This decking is gonna be super durable, last you a long time, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. All right, the sun has come out and I'm getting a nice glisten on here, but what's really important is laying out these joists. And as I start getting these out, I laid out the back one, also laid out the front one over here. What I'm realizing is that I'm getting good contact down here at the front and not so much back here in the back. So I'm just gonna kind of regrade everything. And also because I've got this slope, I gotta remove a little bit more dirt. But basically what you're trying to do, you've already made your cuts. Don't try to recut your boards, just try to adjust the ground. So if you look back here, there's a little bit of a gap, which means I do need to drop this front down. So it's gonna take some trial and error, just adjusting everything, but lay it out and do that before you start attaching everything. Now this ramp is going to be 62 inches wide, so just over 5 feet. And traditionally you would do 16-inch on center joist, or some people might even do 24-inch on center. But we want this thing to be really heavy duty and strong, so I'm going every 12 inches. So we'll have our starting joist. I'm going to add one at 12, 24, 36, 48, and then the last one at 60. So I'm going to go ahead and lay all those out and make sure that everything is level. And that's the beauty of doing it this way, is we can do all that one by one and then level it all together and screw everything in. For the final piece, to get everything tuned in, I grabbed a straight edge and I'm putting it across the boards. I checked them up at the top and then down at the bottom. And what you can basically do is see which ones are low light. This one needs a little, these guys are great, all these guys. And then this back one over here also needs a little bit left. So basically that's what you're trying to do, is just get a flat surface for those boards to lay across. And this is a good way to check it quickly. All right, before I start attaching the joist, again, we're going for a super durable and long-term deck. And part of that is going to be making sure that these joists underneath don't rot. Our Trex deck boards are going to be great, they're taken care of. But one of the things to protect the joist is we can use this Trex Protect joist tape. So this is used in their decking product, but we're basically just making a slanted deck here. So the tops of your joists, you can put this self-adhesive butyl tape, and once it goes on, it sticks down and it's going to keep all the moisture off of the top. What's cool is it'll also seal the screws as we drive those in and basically form a protection so that water can't get down in those screw holes and expand and contract in the winter weather. And then that's something that leads to your deck boards raising up. So I'm going to put this on all the joist tops, and this is really going to help protect the ramp long term. You just want to make sure your joists are free of dust and debris, and then just peel it off and just go a little bit of time, peel the backing off and just lay it right down on the joist. Then after you put it down, you can just kind of smooth over the edges, help it stick a little bit better there. Now that we have the Trex Protect on top, I can go ahead and use my joist hangers. Those will go right over. That's actually another thing that's pretty cool, is it will help protect the reaction between the galvanized and the board. So I'm just gonna use some galvanized screws on top just put these in bottom, and we've got little screw locations here, and then we can put in the joist and attach them from the sides. All right, we've got our hangers in. Now I can just put these back in here, and I'll get everything lined up at the top, and I'm gonna check for level just one more time down at the bottom, and then we'll get everything screwed in from the sides, and we will be ready for some decking. Look at that. That's pretty darn good. Here's an awesome advantage of using these joist hangers is between everything that I was doing to leveling it out, this cut down here, this angle, there's a little bit of a gap, maybe like almost a 1/4 inch gap down here at the bottom of the joist. But because we're fastening in from the sides, that connection with the ledger board is not as important. So all of our weight's gonna be getting carried up here, and that's gonna help. Obviously it'd be better if we were flush, but with this joist hanger, it's not as important. Our joists are all ready and nice and sturdy on that gravel foundation. One thing to protect the undercut of that, you just put some sealant on the bottom. So we've got the Trex Protect on top, but since we did a cut on the pressure treated board, you wanna make sure you seal the underside. So we went ahead and did that on these, and that'll keep anything from having any water damage from the underside. And of course, the tape on the top is gonna protect that. So I'm gonna put a few little connectors in here just to shore things up and make it super solid. All right, so here's the little support spacer blocks. I'm gonna put these in between each joist going down and attach these into the side. I'm actually gonna put them just a little bit lower than the joist so that it won't interfere with the decking at all. And it's really just gonna add a lot of support and also make sure that these are consistent going down the length as we start installing the decking. Phew. So we had two goals for our shed ramp. One was to make it super sturdy, and two was to make it durable. I think we've done a great job with the sturdy part. Now for durable, I have had plenty of projects outside that have been made from pressure treated lumber that have rotted on me. So I knew I wanted to go with composite decking for our shed ramp. So we partnered with Trex and USLBM on this project. And it all started off with a trip to Walker Lumber, who is our local USLBM building supply store. Now, Trex has been the industry leader in composite decking for over 30 years, and they're actually the largest manufacturer of wood alternative decking. So we met up with our local rep, Blake, who showed me all the different types and styles of Trex decking that Walker Lumber had available. Now, they've got a good, better, and best offering, which is pretty cool because it'll fit any budget. Now, the enhanced product is their entry-level decking. It has a scalloped bottom, and that makes it a lighter weight and lower cost option for a tight budget project. Now, on the other end, they have the Transcend line, and that's in their best category. That's a 1-inch solid board, and it's got a thicker shell and a 50-year warranty. And they've got a full line of color options that mimic exotic woods. And this would be perfect for a high-end deck build, but since we're going for a ramp project, we landed on their mid-tier product, which is the Trex Select line. The Trex Select is 7/8 inch thick, and it's got a solid core and a 35-year warranty, so it makes it a great mid-tier balance between performance and price. It's going to resist stains, scratches, and mold, which is perfect for decks, and it's going to be awesome for our ramp. Now, they have a bunch of different color options, and I went with one of their newer ones, and this is Whiskey Barrel. It's got natural grain texture, but it's also got this subtle streaking, so it gives it a nice real wood look. Blake and the Walker Lumber team were super helpful, and all the USLBM locations have experts on site to help you out. They can even provide takeoffs and schedule delivery to your job site, which we set up for the next day. I'm going to have links down below to Trex and USLBM, and USLBM has over 450 locations nationwide, so you can find one local to you. You can go out and talk to an expert to help you with your next project. All right, so there's a couple different ways that you can cut the Trex decking, and I'm going to be using a circular saw because it's nice and easy, but you can use a regular blade. It's just not going to be as good. You might get some melting, you might get some weird cuts. This is actually a fairly high tooth blade, but I would definitely not recommend using like a stock blade that comes with your circular saw. Instead, this is a Trex blade from Diablo, and this has 44 teeth. So you can see there's way more teeth on this versus the other one. And also just some of the geometry helps with getting a super clean cut. And it's also going to make sure that it does not melt the plastic composite because of too much heat. So I'm going to go ahead and install this, and then we'll get to cutting. All right, so the boards that we've got are huge. They are 16 footers. They are also available in 12 and 10 foot. But for us, we're gonna be able to get 3 planks out of each of these. So as I'm cutting this, I'm gonna be cutting it on top of these 2x6s here, and I got a little gap where I can just cut in between, but this will give it nice support. You definitely don't wanna be cutting over here like in a big gap because there's not a lot of structure to the composite material. It's gonna bend down and that can cause binding or just a really bad cut as you're doing it over in the open space. All right, now we are ready for layout and install, and I'm gonna start with my board all the way up against the threshold and then go down from there. And I'm gonna make sure that on the ends, I've got the same overlap, and we'll be actually putting another piece on the side, so we'll cover up all that pressure treated lumber. It's gonna look great. I'm gonna put 2 fasteners on each of the joists, and with these being at 12-inch on center, it actually takes us from 100 pounds per square foot to 200 pounds per square foot for this Trex Select decking, which is awesome. So these are the screws I'm gonna be using. These are part of the Trex Hideaway system, and these are the composite deck screws, and they are colored to match what we have here. So I'm just gonna mount these flush. You can also go a little bit deeper and plug them to make it disappear. Trex also does have a hidden fastener system, and that you would get the boards with this notch on the edge, and then there's basically a little clip that you put in, you screw them in, put the next one on, and it's completely hidden. So that'd be awesome for a deck install. Obviously for the ramp, we're just gonna go with the easy way. I just wanna make sure I get a strong connection. Now, if you guys know me, you know I love symmetry and nice even spacing. So to make sure that I got all of the holes in the right location, I designed and 3D printed this little jig. Basically, I can wrap it over the top of the decking, and then this is screw holes locations, and it's gonna be consistent all the way down. And I actually put a second hole in there for the top one because for our first board, I need to come down a bit because the joist hanger, if you put it in, 1.25 inches, which is where I'm putting all of them, it would run right into the joist hanger. So the first one will be down a little bit, and then the rest of them will just go through these top and bottom holes, and we'll have perfect spacing. Okay, so to put the gap in between the boards, some people use nails, you can use a lot of different things, but again, I 3D printed some little spacers, so this will be perfect for our size. So pre-drilling the deck boards and using the Hideaway screws, this is a great look. There is no mushrooming. I've seen that in the past. You screw these deck boards down and the composites would just mushroom up, but this looks perfect. If you didn't know this, this is made of basically recycled material. And it was funny, we were at the Walker Lumber store and Blake was telling us about the founder and how Trex actually became to be a thing. And it was because the founder used to have chickens. And he wanted a cheap way to feed the chickens. And so he was buying stale bread by the pallet and feeding his chickens. But at the end, he had all these bread bags and a bunch of wood scraps and pallets. And he was trying to figure out what could he do with them. And then one thing led to another, and he put them together and melted them down. And that's how we got Trex decking. So it's really cool because it is an eco-friendly choice. Trex is actually one of the largest recyclers of polyethylene plastic film in North America. So it's really cool, when you're using this product, that it is not something that they're cutting down trees for. They're actually just using scrap from other industries. I'm coming down to the end here, and you may have noticed these boards down here. Now, these are not attached, these are just sitting in here. And the reason I put these in is because this pressure treated wood is not the straightest, unfortunately. So it was kind of collapsing in. And so I put these in as just spacers to hold it open. So one of the things I'm trying to do to help keep everything in line is I'm measuring all the way up to the top and seeing what I am at this distance, and then trying to make sure I'm matching that at the other one, and then adjusting the gap ever so slightly if I need to. And then at the same time, I'm also measuring my overhangs to make sure that those are being consistent. So there's just a couple ways that you can help to keep the ramp straight, but it's still gonna be a struggle if you've got some warped pressure treated boards underneath it. I'm getting down to the last screws here, and there's a little bit of issue with some of these. Also, my drill It's hotter than a $2 pistol. This thing, I think we had 156 or so screws. So make sure you have a good drill because it's gonna get a workout. Now I'm gonna see how these go. That one's fine. The problem is we're getting down to the very bottom of that wedge, and on this one up here at the beginning, what happened is that screw comes through and then it hits a rock, and if it doesn't move the rock away, then it will basically just lift the board up. So we'll see how the rest of these go. I felt that one push the rock out of the way. No problem there. We'll have another go at this one. This was the first one that messed up. You see that there? Because everything else is really solid, I think what I'm gonna do is just go ahead and cut this down. The other alternative would be to maybe do like a concrete anchor drill bit and try to bust the rock up, or just kind of get underneath there and move it around. But I'm just gonna go ahead and zip this down so that it will not go into the rock and just go into the wood. All right, so I basically cut off the bottom 3/4 of an inch to an inch, and now this should drive in flush. There we go, like a glove. All right, now I want to trim out the side of the ramp there so that it's not pressure treated and that we have the nice Trex on there. And I'm not going to use fascia, I'm just going to use the decking on this as well. So if you want to do this, I would suggest using those joist templates and cutting this before you install the decking. Hindsight's 2020. So I do have the offcuts though. So I went ahead and marked what the offcuts are for the angles. Hopefully this is gonna work out, but you know, we'll find out. I will have to make a little notch in there as well for the timbers around the foundation. All right, I got all the deck boards up here, and as I'm looking at it, there's just a few gaps here and there. And again, that's because my board's curved and I just wasn't able to adjust for it the way I wanted to. So what I'm gonna do is what you typically do on a deck and have everything long and then cut a straight line. So I'm gonna do that on these. I'm gonna use the track saw there. Again, you can use a straight edge and your circular saw. We'll just do a nice cut and it will look perfect, even though it might not be. All right, that cut turned out awesome. Everything looks nice and straight, and I went ahead and got these boards cut and I pre-drilled some holes in them. Oh yeah, that's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be a great look. I did the other one as well. Now I'm just gonna pop a few screws in here and we'll be done. Woo! I went ahead and backfilled the dirt around the ramp, and now it is a great transition. Oh, this is absolutely fantastic. Makes it nice and easy to pull things in and out here. So the table saw, my power washer, and of course my buggy here. The ramp turned out great. The Trex Select decking, it looks fantastic. It's gonna be super durable. Looks awesome with the shed. Hopefully I can get a riding mower, which I can then drive up. But this thing is super sturdy, ready for years of use. If you want to see how I built the shed, I've got the videos queued up for you right here. A big thank you to Trex and USLBM for sponsoring today's video. I'm Brad. Until next time, get out there and build something awesome.